Hi, I'm Gregory Pence. This is my personal YouTube channel, Great Stories in Bioethics. Glad you're here today, where I'm talking about bioethical issues in this great HBO Max show called The Pitt, which I think is one of the best shows to come along for bioethics in a long time. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the show, in 2025, it won 5 Emmys, including Best Drama, Best Actor on a Drama for Noah Wyle playing Dr. Robbie. It also won for Best Supporting Actress, Catherine de la Mesa playing Nurse Dana, and it also award for Best Guest Actor, Sean Hastup playing Dr. Abbott, and also an award for Best Casting. It follows in the tradition of other shows like St. Elsewhere, where Denzel Washington debuted, or ER, which showed the debut of George Clooney. You may know the name of The Pit. It's kind of a double entendre. It's kind of a dark humor name for the ER. Some people might call it the hellhole, but it also is short, PITT, for Pittsburgh, and it's at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. In fact, a recent Bioethics Bowl National Championship was there, and my team and I walked by one of the emergency rooms, and I think we were there at one of the exact locations where Melissa and Santos, in the very final episode of episode 2, are talking outside. And so one other thing about the show, it does a classical thing of having a lot of drama in a very small place. Kind of like the command center of the Starship Enterprise on Star Trek, or Cheers, or Seinfeld, or Friends, where there's a lot of activity around a bar or an apartment. And so dramatically, with cameras, you can capture a lot at an intensity that's amazing. And on The Pit, it's a very realistic portrayal of an emergency room. So the first ethical issue I want to talk about at The Pit is really not obvious, I think, and that is ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And I believe this is one of the great hidden bioethical issues of COVID that really has not been discussed much or even understood or outed by either public or medicines.
A mom encourages her daughter to walk. This time the daughter is 29 years old and mom can only be there virtually on an iPad.
I can't believe you're locked.
So what is ECMO? It's basically an artificial lung for people in severe respiratory distress, like people got with COVID, when it affected their lungs and basically destroyed their lungs. It's a measure of last resort. It was sometimes used for children before they might get lung transplants, or adults. It's a very invasive procedure where surgeons have to insert cannulas for the blood to leave the body and be oxygenated and then return. But in the show, Dr. Robbie has a flashback because he was taking care of his mentor, Dr. Abramson, who looks like, or maybe Dr. Adamson, I forget exactly the name, was his mentor and a brilliant man, and he was COVID and is dying. Everybody's in ET suits. There's a very key moment in the flashback where someone off camera says to Dr. Robbie, he's not improving, and a 12-year-old needs the ECMO machine. And presumably, Dr. Adamson has been on this ECMO for 17 days, and presumably Dr. Robbie takes him off the machine and he dies. And this brings up some of the really crucial issues during COVID: the allocation of ICUs, emergency room beds, respirators, ventilators. A lot of people know about this. They don't know so much about ECMO. And ECMO were very expensive machines. They were basically only in academic medical centers. And the public and medicine basically gave those doctors no help whatsoever. In one of the very few studies at Vanderbilt Medical Center, it was estimated that 90% of people who could have benefited from ECMO never got it. I wrote a book about some of this called What Went Wrong. It's a little bit like Hume's treatise that it fell stillborn from the press last year, because I think no one wants to talk about or think about COVID anymore. But we really should talk about ECMO and what happened. So in the study at Vanderbilt, it basically says that the median age of someone who could have benefited was 40, that most people didn't get it. And there were some terrible dilemmas. They just talked about a case at Seattle, a woman named Betty, who had been on respiratory stress. She was an adult, transferred to a children's hospital because there was an ECMO machine available, and she was on it for about 7 weeks. And during that time, many children who needed it couldn't get it. So there really was no criteria for who should get it. It's not the best way to allocate, like the first one who arrives gets everything, and then nobody else gets anything, especially if you think about how could we get the most years per machine, per organ out of this? How could we be good utilitarians here? One of the ethical problems, though, is that, and we saw this in COVID all the time, doctors and nurses found it very, very hard to withdraw life-giving ventilators, feeding tubes, ECMO machines. It was easy to forego, but to actually forego made you feel like you were killing. And we see that Dr. Robbie has moral injury. We know later that he was abandoned as an 8-year-old. He's a wounded warrior, and he could not save his mentor. And I mean, I would not want to be in that position to have tried to save a mentor and be the one to pull the plug, so to speak, and try to live with that. So that is really a great moral issue that the Pitt indirectly and very briefly brings up. A second moral issue that they do spend more time, opioid epidemic in America. And we know that because of Purdue Pharma and OxyContin, America was flooded with opioids that were marketed as non-addictive. And a lot of people, still have about 90,000 overdoses a year. In Canada, it's pretty bad too. We learned that fentanyl was laced a lot of things to increase the potency, and such even more people died. And so we have a young boy who takes his Xanax in the library study and a slice of fentanyl, and he ends up brain dead, and his parents have a hard time accepting it. And eventually they allow him to be an organ donor. There's a really great scene where there's an honor walk as his body is removed. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We also see Dr. McKay go AWOL and go out into the streets and treat a homeless woman who's been abusing Trach, TRANQ, which is like an elephant version of fentanyl, very deadly, creates horrible scarring on your skin and veins, and we see it. One of the medical students is horrified. It's good to show out of that, but there is an even more serious issue going down now that's in the background of all this. It's something, if you've never heard about it, it could save your life. It's called nitizenes, Nitazenes. And it turns out that a long time ago, pharmacologists were studying even more potent versions of fentanyl. A lot of them didn't work out in animal models. A lot of them were too powerful. However, when the federal government in China pushed down on fentanyl and made it go away, these illicit drug makers, like in Breaking Bad, turned to some of these old products. And the nitizenes are versions like protonitizene that are 10, 20, 50 times more powerful than fentanyl. They're untraceable. You can't do a test strip for them. And people are starting to overdose all the time on them. There was a wonderful case that the New York Times exposed of a neuroscience major at the University of Colorado Boulder who ordered some Quaaludes on the dark web. He tested them for fentanyl. He thought he was safe, and he died because they were laced with nitizenes. This is going to be a really big issue for emergency rooms. And one of the lessons here is never take a pill from someone else. A lot of these pills look exactly like a benzodiazepine, a Xanax, a Percocet. You can't be sure what these pills are made of, whether they have nitizenes in them. A really big issue for ERs. Another moral issue that's very interesting, I think, that the Pitt does a really good job about is whether the staff should be agents of the state. Under EMTLA, E-M-T-L-A, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, emergency rooms are required to treat everyone regardless of their finances and to stabilize them. This creates a lot of dilemmas because we want to train medical students and doctors to give the best care. We often train them not to really know about how much the best care costs. So there's always this tension between giving the best care and how much this is going to cost. The other tension is federal government and government are increasingly asking staff in ER to be agents of the state, to report elder abuse, to report spouse abuse, to report. We have this episode where Dr. McKay thinks that David, whose mother brings him in, might be going to harm some girls at school, and whether he needs to be reported. Making people in the ER report to the state is a very contentious issue. When the ICE agents come in one episode, they really resent it. There was one time in California where years ago they tried to make people in the ER document whether someone was here illegally or not. And the ER staff mightily resisted this. But there is this tension, especially in a hospital that gets federal funds or it's a public hospital, you're a state employee. How much do you just try to give good patient care? And how much are you enforcing policies of the state? In regard to that, especially in terms of reporting elderly abuse or spouse abuse, you notice that the social worker is extremely important in the ER. A lot of the problems about reporting are going to be offloaded to her or him. I wouldn't want to be a social worker associated with the ER because there are so many problems get dumped on you. But that is one of the ways I get handled. So another ethical issue that the Pitt does really well with is hostile patients. And in this world of political polarization, there are so many people who are angry and mad, and it comes out in the hospital. It comes out when, as a middle-aged white man who's very mad that he's not taken sooner, and he's mad about everything in the ER, and he ends up punching Dana and fleeing. He's so angry. Also, the people, staff in the ER sometimes get physically assaulted. People who are given Narcan for overdose, when they come back, they're often in a very violent, unhappy state. They can bite you. They can puke all over you. You get this with their head turned away. People who are outed for their cocaine or methamphetamine abuse are not happy about being outed to their families or employers. And also we have Dr. Google out there, everybody wanting to be natural, like a wild birth, or not ever have their kid have a spinal tap to check for meningitis. People are just so hostile to evidence-based medicine. It is a continuing problem that ER doctors face. I wouldn't want to have to deal with it myself. So another issue that the Pitt does in a very good way has to do with doctors stealing drugs or using drugs on duties. This is when Lantos steals some benzos from his patient. I think his name was Willie, and gets caught by Santos. This really is an issue where hospitals and ERs can have zero tolerance because it really is a slippery slope. It's bad enough to be using illicit drugs inappropriately on duty, but to actually steal them from a patient is really, really bad. There's been some episodes where hospice nurses treating dying patients at home steal fentanyl patches that were meant for the patient, or after the patient dies, all the addicting drugs disappear. It is a really big deal for these nurses to have to do random drug testing because it is so tempting. Most cities like Pittsburgh and Birmingham have many, many groups at night for doctors and nurses and dentists who got addicted on the job and tried to fake it. So stealing drugs from a patient is really a borderline, an ethical bright line that Dr. Robbie is quite right to be upset about. And you see that it takes a long, long time for Santos to get certified and to come back. So another ethical issue that keeps coming up is burnout and moral injury. One of the episodes, Dr. Robbie confesses that it's just so hard for him to see patients die. They love to save patients. They love to feel supremely competent. Every death feels like a failure. The death of his mentor felt like a failure. You just wonder how much people can take, especially in the ER, because it's not like palliative care or hospice care where people are dying. Most of the people coming to the ER are not meant to die. So their deaths are really, really hard deaths. We see this tension about how much you can take. So there's two kinds of med students and residents. There's people like Dr. McKay and Melissa, who are very empathetic, very compassionate, and feel maybe too much. Samira Laura is like this, Mohan. She feels too much. And then there are people like Santos who are like, have a kind of wall up. They don't really feel that much, and they're interested in great cases and gruesome stuff so they can learn more. And I've seen this in med students who, really want to get esoteric, weird stuff and they get excited about that. Underneath this all is this tension about feeling competent. And imagine how competent you have to feel in the ER where every conceivable kind of patient, every conceivable kind of problem comes in, and somehow you have to deal with it. It seems to me almost impossible to feel competent in that situation. And we all should, I think, be a little empathetic about possible mistakes, which of course plague all the students and residents and doctors, that they might be subpoenaed and sued. That's a really big issue. There's a lot of other issues that I don't have time to talk about. Families struggling with a DNR order, patients dying and families not being prepared for it. I don't think it's realistic that people would actually die in the ER over days and weeks. They'll be transferred to somewhere else for dramatic purposes. We let the show get away from that. But the show brings up lots of other issues: weight bias of staff against overweight patients, measles, fear of vaccinations. It's a really great show. Each episode is an hour, presumably in a very long day of a 12-hour shift. The second season is on July 4th. And it's a great show. So I hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, share it, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again next Tuesday at 4 p.m.